This woman destroyed her entire marriage over tennis lessons. Not because she was passionate about the sport, not because she wanted to get fit, but because her coach made her feel something her husband supposedly couldn't. Her name was Sienna, she was 34 years old, and by the time she realized what she'd actually lost, it was already far too late to get it back. I'm Emma, and this is her story. Sienna's marriage was only 8 months old when everything started falling apart. Her husband, Garrett, worked as a pilot, which meant he was away from home 3 weeks out of every month. When he finally came back, he was exhausted, barely able to hold a conversation beyond, asking what was for dinner or complaining about delays and difficult passengers. Sienna felt invisible, like she was just another piece of furniture in their home. Her friends kept telling her she needed to find something for herself, stop sitting around waiting for Garrett to notice her. So she decided to pick up tennis again. She'd played back in high school. Thought it would be easy to get back into the swing of things. The tennis club she joined wasn't anything fancy, just a decent local place with good instructors. That's where she met Finn. He was 27, maybe 28, tall, from Australia, with an easy smile and a way of making everyone feel comfortable. He'd worked in education before becoming a tennis coach, and from their very first lesson, Sienna noticed something different about him. Unlike other fitness professionals who just went through the motions, Finn actually talked to her. He asked about her background, what brought her to tennis, what she hoped to achieve. He made jokes that actually made her laugh. And that's when Sienna realized something devastating. She couldn't remember the last time Garrett had made her laugh. Those first few weeks felt like therapy. Twice a week for an hour, Sienna had someone's complete attention. Someone who noticed when she improved, who complimented her effort, who asked how her week was going. It sounds simple, but after months of being treated like she didn't exist in her own home, this basic human interaction felt revolutionary. The 1-hour lessons started stretching longer, 90 minutes, then 2 hours. Finn told her she had natural talent, that she was progressing faster than most students, that certain techniques required extra time to perfect. Sienna didn't mind at all. Going home to an empty house after tennis just made her feel depressed, so why not stay and actually enjoy herself? During water breaks, Finn started asking more personal questions. How long had she been married? What was it like being with someone who traveled constantly? Did she get lonely? Sienna found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in months. Finn actually listened to her answers. He asked follow-up questions. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding her life. Meanwhile, whenever she tried talking to Garrett about anything deeper than weekend plans, he'd just nod while scrolling through his phone. They started grabbing coffee after lessons, just to continue their conversations about tennis strategy, or at least that's how it began. But those discussions always drifted into other topics. Finn would share stories about his life in Australia, his family back home, his dreams of opening his own coaching facility someday. Sienna would talk about her life before marriage, the things she used to enjoy, the dreams she'd quietly put away. These conversations felt natural, engaging. They reminded her what it was like to actually connect with someone, not just coexist in the same space. She started putting more effort into her appearance on tennis days, choosing outfits more carefully, spending extra time on her hair and makeup. She told herself it wasn't necessarily for Finn, but because it felt good to look good, to feel attractive again. Garrett barely noticed what she wore anymore, but Finn always did. He'd comment if she looked nice, tell her a color suited her, notice if she'd tried a different hairstyle. These small acknowledgments made her feel seen as a woman, not just as a wife going through the motions of a dying marriage. Their text conversations started innocently. Questions about technique, confirming lesson times, basic logistics. But gradually, they became longer, more personal. Finn would ask how her day went. She'd tell him about whatever was bothering her, how frustrated she felt about Garrett being gone again. He always knew exactly what to say to make her feel better. He had this way of making her problems seem manageable, her feelings valid. After one particularly good session, Finn suggested they celebrate with drinks instead of their usual coffee. Sienna hesitated for maybe 2 seconds before saying yes. They went to a quiet bar near the club. 2 drinks became 4. Sienna found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, how isolated she felt in her marriage, how Garrett treated her like just another task on his to-do list instead of his partner. Finn was understanding. supportive. He told her she deserved better, that any man would be lucky to have her attention. When he walked her to her car, they stood there looking at each other, and Sienna could feel something fundamental shifting between them. Nothing happened that night. They just said goodbye. But she drove home with butterflies in her stomach that she hadn't felt in years. That same night, Garrett called from whatever city he was working in, talking about flight delays and passenger complaints. All Sienna could think was how Finn would never bore her with those kinds of mundane details. Finn cared about meaningful conversations, interesting topics, real emotional connection. Before she fully realized what was happening, tennis became a daily routine. Finn convinced her that if she was serious about improving, daily practice was essential. It made perfect sense to Sienna. Besides, Garrett was gone for 2 weeks straight on an extended route. What else was she supposed to do? Sit home alone watching television? She and Finn developed this wonderful rhythm. She'd arrive every morning at 10. They'd train for 2 or 3 hours, then grab lunch and talk about everything under the sun. He was becoming her closest friend. Honestly, the only person in her life who really seemed to understand her. The other wives in her neighborhood only talked about their children or their husbands' careers, superficial topics that bored her. But Finn asked about her dreams, what she wanted from life, whether she felt fulfilled. These were questions Garrett never asked anymore. The coaching itself was becoming more hands-on too. Finn would adjust her form by positioning her arms correctly, standing close behind her to demonstrate proper mechanics. Completely normal coaching techniques. But Sienna couldn't ignore how strong his hands felt, how her heart raced when he stood that close. Sometimes their eyes would meet for just a moment longer than necessary, and she'd feel this electricity she definitely wasn't experiencing at home. When Garrett finally came home from his trip, he barely asked about her tennis progress. Just gave her a quick kiss hello and immediately started sorting through his mail and checking work emails. That night at dinner, Sienna tried telling him how much she'd improved, how Finn thought she had real potential for competitive play. Garrett just nodded while scrolling through his phone. When she suggested he come watch her play sometime, support her the way other husbands supported their wives, he said he'd try to fit it into his schedule. Try to fit it in. Like supporting his wife was some kind of inconvenience. The next morning, Sienna told Finn about Garrett's reaction. Finn just shook his head sympathetically. He said any husband should feel proud to have a wife who is passionate about improving herself. That comment stayed with Sienna. Finn understood her in ways Garrett never had, even during their honeymoon phase. Their text conversations became constant. Good morning messages, updates throughout the day, goodnight texts that sometimes continued for hours. The attention was intoxicating after months of being completely ignored by her own husband. She started anticipating Finn's messages more than Garrett's obligatory calls from whatever city he was working in. One afternoon, Finn suggested they practice serves at the outdoor courts since the indoor facilities were all reserved. The setting felt more intimate somehow, away from the usual crowd. When Finn positioned himself behind her to adjust her serving stance, Sienna could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his body. Her heart raced in a way that had nothing to do with exercise. When she turned around, Finn was looking at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Then Garrett came home from another business trip full of questions. Where was this curiosity 3 months ago? He wanted to know why she was going every single day, why the sessions lasted so long, whether she really needed that much instruction. Sienna explained that Finn said she had genuine talent, that daily practice was the only way to reach her potential. But Garrett looked at her like she was being dishonest. Then he dropped a completely unreasonable demand. He wanted to attend one of her lessons. Just show up and invade something that was hers. Sienna told him it wouldn't work because Finn tailored each session specifically to her. Having a spectator would be distracting and ruin the rhythm they'd developed. But Garrett kept pushing, acting like she was hiding something. Sienna finally lost her temper. She told Garrett the truth he didn't want to hear. Maybe if he was home more often, maybe if he actually cared about her emotional well-being, she wouldn't need to spend so much time at the tennis club finding the connection she wasn't getting in her marriage. Maybe if he asked about her day with half the enthusiasm he showed for flight schedules, she wouldn't need someone else to have real conversations with. She said Finn appreciated her as a person. Finn listened when she talked. Finn made her feel like her thoughts and feelings actually mattered. Was it her fault that her tennis coach did a better job of being emotionally present than her own husband? Garrett went completely silent. Then he started talking about how he worked to support their lifestyle, how his career required extensive travel, how she knew what she was signing up for when she married him. Sienna told him money doesn't cure loneliness and a house isn't a home when you're the only person in it. Then Garrett asked the question that really crossed the line. He asked if there was something she needed to tell him about Finn. The accusation in his voice, the immediate assumption that she must be doing something wrong. Sienna told him he was being paranoid, that Finn was a complete professional, and she was a married woman who respected her commitments. But the fact that Garrett jumped straight to suspicion instead of trying to understand why she needed more emotional connection just proved everything she'd been saying. He didn't trust her. He didn't really know her. And he certainly didn't appreciate what she brought to their relationship. After that argument, Garrett started monitoring her like a criminal, asking detailed questions about her schedule, wanting to know exactly when she'd be home, checking her phone when he thought she wasn't looking. The man who couldn't be bothered to ask about her day for months was suddenly acting like a detective. He even suggested she find a different coach, like Finn was the problem instead of Garrett's complete failure as an emotionally present husband. Sienna refused. She and Finn had built an incredible training relationship. She wasn't about to throw that away because Garrett suddenly decided to care about her activities. The tension at home became unbearable. Garrett made passive-aggressive comments about how much time she spent at the club, how much the lessons cost, whether she was really improving enough to justify daily sessions. Meanwhile, Finn was supportive, telling her how proud he was of her progress, how she was his most dedicated student. Things with Finn were intensifying. Their conversations had moved far beyond tennis. He'd share details about his past relationships, how he'd never met anyone quite like her. Sienna confided everything. Her frustrations with Garrett, her fears about her marriage, her dreams of feeling truly alive again. One afternoon, Finn asked her directly if she was happy in her marriage. No diplomacy, just a straightforward question that demanded honesty. Sienna told him truthfully that she hadn't felt genuinely happy in a very long time, that she and Garrett had become strangers who happened to share living space. Finn said he could see how unhappy she was, that she deserved so much more. When he reached out and touched her hand, she didn't pull away. The next few weeks felt like living a double life. At home, Garrett was watching her every move, making her feel like a prisoner. But with Finn, she felt free, appreciated, genuinely cared for. Their conversations became increasingly intimate. Finn would tell her how beautiful she was, how any man would be fortunate to have her, how he couldn't understand why Garrett didn't treasure what he had. Finally, Garrett presented her with an ultimatum. Either quit tennis entirely and work on their marriage, or he was done. Just like that. No discussion, no compromise, no acknowledgement of his role in their problems. He wanted her to give up the one thing that made her happy and return to being his lonely, ignored housewife. Sienna actually laughed. She told him if he felt so threatened by her tennis coach that he needed to control her friendships, then maybe their marriage was already beyond saving. She said Finn had treated her better in 3 months than Garrett had managed in 3 years of marriage. That was the final straw. Garrett said if she valued her tennis coach more than her marriage, she could figure out how to pay for those lessons herself. He moved into the guest bedroom that night and barely spoke to her for days. Finn noticed the change in her mood immediately. His genuine concern was so different from Garrett's angry demands. Here was someone who actually cared about her emotional state, who wanted to help instead of making things worse. 3 months later, Garrett filed for divorce. Sienna moved out into a small apartment, thinking she and Finn could finally be together openly. She was ready to start fresh with someone who truly understood her. Except things didn't unfold the way she'd imagined. Finn started acting differently after she left Garrett. Their connection wasn't as exciting anymore. He'd cancel lessons at the last minute, take forever to respond to texts. When Sienna suggested they make their relationship official, he got uncomfortable and said he needed time to think. Then Sienna discovered the devastating truth. Finn had been running the exact same routine with 2 other married students, the same intimate conversations, the same special attention, the same promises about their potential and how different they were. Sienna wasn't special at all. She was just another lonely housewife he could manipulate for attention, money, and ego validation. When she confronted him, he had the nerve to act like she was being dramatic. He said he'd enjoyed their time together, but had never made any serious promises. Never promised anything? He'd told her she deserved better than Garrett, that he'd never met anyone like her, that she was special. Sienna tried desperately to salvage things for several more weeks, but Finn kept pulling away. Finally, he told her he was moving back to Australia to reconcile with an ex-girlfriend. Just like that, the man who'd convinced her to throw away her marriage was walking out of her life like she'd meant nothing. Meanwhile, Garrett had moved on completely. 6 months after their divorce, Sienna saw pictures on social media of him with someone new, a colleague he'd met through work. She looked happy and in love, exactly the way Sienna used to look in their early photos. The worst part was seeing how different Garrett appeared with her. Relaxed, genuinely smiling. Present in a way he'd never been with Sienna toward the end. They got engaged after dating only 8 months. 8 months. It had taken him over 2 years to propose to Sienna. Seeing them together made her realize something painful. Maybe the problem wasn't just Garrett's travel schedule or work demands. Maybe they simply weren't compatible in ways she'd refused to acknowledge. But by then, it was far too late to fix anything. Sienna was alone in her tiny apartment. Finn was gone forever. And Garrett was building a beautiful life with someone who apparently inspired him to be the partner she'd always wanted. Her friends from the tennis club stopped including her in events once Finn left town. Turns out they'd all known about his pattern with married students. They just felt sorry for her. The humiliation of being the last to know, of being seen as just another naive victim, was crushing. Even the divorce settlement went badly. Since she'd been the one to leave the marriage, and Garrett could prove she'd been having an inappropriate relationship, she received far less than expected. She had to find employment for the first time in years, and the only position she qualified for barely covered rent. Looking back, Sienna says she doesn't regret leaving Garrett because their marriage was already dying, but she absolutely hates that she trusted Finn so completely. She hates that she believed his lies about being special and different. And mostly, she hates that Garrett found happiness so quickly, while she's still struggling to rebuild her life. But here's what Sienna still doesn't fully understand. Her marriage didn't fail just because Garrett traveled for work. It failed because instead of communicating honestly about her needs, instead of suggesting counseling or finding real solutions, she poured all her emotional energy into someone outside her marriage. She created an emotional affair and called it friendship. She compared her husband's worst moments to Finn's carefully curated best moments, and when reality finally revealed itself, both men were gone. The saddest part? Garrett wasn't perfect, but he was trying to build a life for them. He was working, providing, doing what he thought was right. Maybe if Sienna had put half the energy into her marriage that she put into those tennis lessons, things could have been different. Maybe if she'd been as honest with Garrett as she was with Finn, they could have found their way back to each other. Instead, she chose the easy comfort of someone who told her what she wanted to hear. And she lost everything. This is Emma, reminding you that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it's just artificial turf that looks good from a distance but leaves you empty when you're standing on it. If this story made you think, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Mrs. Emma's channel because every week, I bring you real stories about real people and the choices that change their lives forever. Don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next story.